Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
It's my pleasure to introduce this afternoon Professor Alexander Mamishev. Professor Mamishev is at the University of Washington, and he's the director of the SEAL, Sensors, Energy, and Automation Laboratory, as well as the director of the Electrical Energy Industrial Consortium. And he's an expert in the field of sensors and robotics, but that's not what he's coming here to talk about. I actually met him a couple of months ago when I went to UW to give a talk, and I was introduced to him, and he mentioned that he had been doing this work on the side that had nothing to do with his day job for using Microsoft Word for academic writing. And so, well, that sounds kind of interesting because a lot of people in this building, we are facing that task. And so I said, well, don't you come and give us a talk and see what we can learn from you. So without further ado, Professor Mamishev. Oh, one more thing. If you're interested in talking to him afterwards, he'll be available after the talk.
Okay. Thank you. So it's an unusual lecture for me. The lights. These lights can figure it out. It's unusual. I give a lot of lectures at corporate rooms like this, but they're always on the subject of my core research. So I usually talk about sensor networks, about RFID tags, about robots, show videos of those. And this is the first time I'm going to talk about something that's not really my core research, but I deal with it every day. And the audience is Microsoft. And of course, people in my department at the university, they know I go to Microsoft. When they've heard Mamishev is going to Microsoft to give a lecture on how to use Microsoft Word. It sounds like a complete nonsense, of course. It, of course, generates jokes and gives some local. In an academic environment, it's good to have some fun. But this is more than a fun. My presentation is not a joke. I'll try to keep it reasonably entertaining and also reasonably short. It's a good thing we run out of handouts. It means we have a lot of people. You could see in handouts, it's 25 slides. I can maintain it interactive mode easily. I actually would like to get some feedback, and I definitely don't need the hour and a half that is allocated for a full lecture. I'll finish before that. So some of my presentation, some of discussion during presentation, and those hardcore, most interested people who want to stay after, I will just talk to them after that. All right? So that's my lecture, Effective Use of Microsoft Word for Academic Writing. Okay, it's working. This problem definition, that's really what my presentation is about. I want to get a feel that some other people, do they see a problem of what exists currently in academic writing? I will spend a big fraction of presentation on that. Okay, I will reiterate this, explain what I am presenting here and what I am not presenting, so you're not misled. And if at that moment you find out presentation is not what you wanted to hear, that's fine. Feel free to leave me. We have so many people. I don't feel offended. Students walk out on me sometimes. I'm used to it. Okay. Then I will have a deeper look into this problem that we will define here, problem of people using, how they use Microsoft Word. I'll discuss the system that what sort of pushed this presentation into existence. Over the last few years, I developed a system just for myself, from my lab, for my collaborators, that has been effective. I'll discuss that, some conclusions, and then we will have more discussion after that. So the problem. To give the problem, I have a little illustration of what I'm talking about. Let me manage my computer. We have the sound. We have the sound. So some of you already know How do I play this?
See, what we're actually trying to do here is we're trying to get a feel for how people spend their day at work. So, if you would you walk us through a typical day for you?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I generally come in at least 15 minutes late. I use the side door. That way Lumberg can't see me. And after that, I just sort of space out for about an hour. Till
Space out?
Yeah, I just stare at my desk. But it looks like I'm working. I do that for probably another hour after lunch, too. I'd say in a given week, I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual work.
Okay, so that's kind of a problem that I want to discuss. The bigger picture, which I will not address here, is the actual research work is only a small fraction of work time, and we spend in academia a lot of our time doing other things. Okay, and that's a whole big topic outside of my discussion. Smaller problem is closer I'm zooming in. Specifically, typesetting takes too much time. Specifically, I lose students' productivity for. I don't. Others do. Now I don't. But the student can be out of operation for a month when student is working on a thesis, whereas nothing new is happening. He's just typesetting and struggling, compiling, recompiling this document, trying to make it look good. Okay, typesetting generally takes too much time. And part of this typesetting is the group writing. Group writing is typically poorly organized. So that's the problem, and I hope to find some people who agree with me that that problem exists. Now, to make clear what my presentation is about, I'll discuss how typesetting takes place, especially specifically people who write for journals, for or high-level technical reports, beyond memos and letters, complex documents that contain equations and pictures, patterns of behavior of what I observe every day, how people deal with it. Then I will sort of go towards solution. What are the requirements for effective typesetting system in academia? And I use this word academia. Of course, it's not limited. I'm in Microsoft Research. A lot of people here, they publish every day. I just had to find a short word to describe it. So sort of I could say scientific writing. Brief examples of effective use of Microsoft Word to illustrate what I'm talking about and what can be done, not about examples, but about the problem that I introduced before. What can be done about it? What my lecture is not about, I am not going to lecture specifically on typesetting. That would have been a different lecture, and I delivered that to my coworkers many times. That's not my goal today. It's just that I found, and I won't deliver a lecture on how to use Microsoft Word comprehensively. That's not my goal here. And even the specific tips and tricks, I'll just show a few examples to get you a feel where I'm going to. But it's not the main goal of my lecture. Okay. So this is a target population. What you see here is my research lab. You can see me here on an annual tour de lake. It's a bicycle tour around Lake Washington. And it's mostly my students and also a few invited people, company collaborators, for example. This is roughly the number of people you could count, maybe 30 people here, that work in my organization, which I have to direct. And each of them is a small or big scientist, and they all produce written output. So in any given year, my lab, these people produce, I estimate 1,000 to 2,000 pages of properly typeset output. If you add up every thesis, every journal paper, and every report to our sponsors, government, federal agencies, and so on. So, and each of these pages goes through me, and I look at these pages and I mark it up, and how little of my time goes actually into thinking about the research issues, especially in academia, because Most of these people are students, graduate students. So I have to worry, any professor, right, anyone who directs research, we have to worry about proper analysis of experimental data, the statistical analysis, then the style of writing, organization of ideas. And somewhere at the bottom of this pile is typesetting. This figure is numbered incorrectly and everything is too small. And naturally, typesetting is a Cinderella of all these issues, of the skill set of a scientist. Right? There are more important things. I'm not arguing against it. It's more important to be aware of issues of ethics in science than to typeset. But multiplied by these thousands of pages, it becomes an issue. And so that's the target type of environment that I'm going to talk about. There are other environments where my discussion is not applicable. For example, sales office. They deal with Excel spreadsheets and memos, documents that do not contain so many long formulated arguments supported by references and equations and figures. And for them, what I'm going to talk about is less important. So in a typical academic lab, there is a large number of inexperienced writers, students, big organizational overhead on directing them. The product is, I talked about these thousands of pages produced of papers, reports, patents, theses, all of it. Typical academic lab, and that's going to become important, it has collaboration with other organizations. Very few people work just in a closed environment. Some work in a closed style environment. For example, mathematicians who only collaborate with mathematicians. Okay? But more frequently, we work with, let's say, National Science Foundation, and they want PowerPoint slides to present it to their bosses. So very different type of people. So group writing becomes very important, and it's a group writing with diverse set of people. You want an undergraduate to produce a little half-page insert into the report, and then you want a professor on East Coast to send you another 7 pages into the same report, and you need to compile it. And some people, do it very differently. Some organizations maintain a big staff of secretaries. Some organizations impose different templates. There are many solutions. They do exist. And there is many bicycle invention type activities. It is important to recognize that text and figures gets reused. It's appropriate. I'm not talking about plagiarism. It's you develop a report and then it becomes part of an annual report, and the text becomes part of a conference paper, which later gets developed into a journal paper. And when these things are done manually, the same figure is number 35 in one report and number 2 in another report, and so on. To reiterate the problem is not how to number the figure automatically properly. That is easy to solve. The problem is that very, very few people do it. Most people choose to do it manually. So a few illustration, horror stories, okay? All of them real, all of them happened in my organization. The thesis does not compile well when several research papers are written in Word. A student works on the research for several years, writes several good journal papers. Then journal paper 1 is chapter 2 in the thesis, and next journal paper is basically chapter 3 in the thesis. Needs to be stitched together. But when it becomes 100 pages, students very often give up and say, oh, that's too big, we can't do it. And then some smart guy comes, oh, of course, it's a thesis, you have to use LaTeX. So they go get a book on LaTeX, they go to lectures, they learn, oh, that's beautiful, I wish I was using LaTeX. So it comes up, they produce a thesis. But then, what happens next? That happened to me. Some people may challenge me, oh, you're anti-LaTeX. My PhD thesis at MIT is 709 pages. written in LaTeX with very advanced features. I have programmed Easter eggs. You know, I consulted people on LaTeX. I know that system very well. Okay? You can test me on that. I finished it. 700 pages. It was the limit of the thickness of the binder that could make one volume. My advisor required single volume thesis. And then I had a national fellowship, okay? And it came back very strong. We have to have a report. Excerpt of this, 150 pages maybe. We have to have a report on your work. Has to be in Word, because that's our requirement. So now I have to take 150 pages of thesis and turn it into a Word document, again, because that's the requirement, and I have to do it. So I went through that pain, and as a graduate student, I didn't have a secretary to do it. My time is not appreciated, so it's doable. And there are tools for it. In Germany, they like to develop them. Word to text, text to Word. There are different routines that convert documents. There is software for it. It doesn't work very well. It gives you something that you can work with. Okay, so up to next horror story. People who try to write a proposal in LaTeX, you have very often a good, experienced professor, but in his field. But he does not. He kind of can use LaTeX, but doesn't have patience to do it. So every time something doesn't work, calls a student, come and fix it for me. Okay, very common, right? In Microsoft, many people have seen Evolution of a Programmer, the very common file. You may know what I'm referring to. The first programmer writes it in BASIC, and then in C, and then in Perl, more and more complex programs. But then as person progresses through the ranks, eventually your upper-level management, and the most you can do is to press a button, Jimmy, come and fix my email. And that's level of the knowledge. But these people have to write proposals, and they're the only ones who can write it, because crafting the language for a multi-million grant, you cannot ask somebody to do it for you. But then it becomes very hard to work with this person. So the message comes in, let's all switch to Word because I can use it. Next horror story happened to me. I was working with people who were using Word. They were leading the proposal. I am contributing my piece. A week before the deadline, I request, can you insert another figure in the introduction? I think it will make a very good point. And they said, no, we were using this figure XX, figure XX, and we switched now, and we manually numbered them. At this point, document is frozen. We are not changing it. Back off. We are not changing it. So what happened was the quality of writing, the rigor, was compromised due to thumb setting in order to maintain the rigor of sticking to deadlines, which is also important. There are answers to all these questions. I am not that, and hundreds of people had known and produced these answers, but they are still a minority. Okay, next one. So this horror story, very common I am an electrical engineer, very common. Somebody comes in and says, well, if you do real science, you need to use LaTeX because any decent equation, anything complicated, you just cannot use it. Equation editor is useless for that. Or somebody would say, okay, you could use mass type, you could switch to it. Yes, but I like using LaTeX because I can keep my fingers on the keyboard, and I don't have to use a mouse to make an equation. So for these reasons, people choose it. So this lack of consistency between the styles affects people every day in academia, affects them a lot. Can it be avoided? Certainly can be avoided. There is quite a few labs who developed their system, their style, and they are happy. Statistically, I rarely come across these labs, and I would hope I don't work with just dummies. I have collaborators in top 20 institutions, and statistically, I don't meet many of those people. Now, the problem is not how to design the system. The system can be designed. The problem is that most labs do not have this good system. It's an existing situation. It's how the world is. Similarly, similar story that it really happens is the QWERTY keyboard. Many of you probably know the story of QWERTY. This location of the keys on the keyboard was developed to slow people down because the old typewriters would have these little hammers, and the better placement, faster placement of keys on a keyboard would stick the hammers. So in early 1900s, they developed this inconvenient location of the keys. Later in 50s, when, not even before computers, but when the golf ball typewriters came into existence, a better location of keys was developed, optimal, that makes you type faster. But the reality is the world didn't switch. The millions of people who use it, they typed 30% slower and developed RSI because the keyboard didn't switch. So it's kind of a cousin problem. It's possible to do it, but nobody does it. So the world remains ineffective. What should a typesetting system provide? Based on my previous discussion, it has to provide internal compatibility for reuse and sharing of data. So when one graduate student produces a result, it comes to a group of graduate students who write a big overview report. That text gets improved, analyzed, it goes into the proposal and goes into report, and hopefully you don't spend too much time every time retypesetting the details of that document. It has to provide external compatibility so that you can call to a person in another university and send them the file, and they copy and paste it and put it in their document, and then the cross-references remain correct and valid, and they focus on the content, not on making sure that all these little typesetting details are taken care of. It should help streamlining of data processing. The figures should be easily reused. General automation of the document. Everything in the document has to be automated. I'll expand on it a little bit more. And the system should provide, if it's a good system, it will lead to rigor, to high quality of writing and typesetting. You remember that horror story? I said the collaborator would not put a figure in because it would require renumbering. That they sacrifice the rigor and quality because of typesetting. A good system would provide that. So there are two major. There are other ones. There is Ventura tools, there are other things, but they're not used when people down in the lab write documents, not widely. Okay, there are two major choices that people make. LaTeX, which is implemented in many software packages, PCTech and so on, and Microsoft Word. LaTeX has some advantages. It enforces proper typesetting. I'll have a separate slide to that. If you set it on LaTeX, it's going to look nice. Even if you are a very inexperienced writer, even if you don't know what you're doing, it will force you to do it right. Okay? As opposed to Word that lets you do anything you want. It's great, but you give it to an undergraduate student and it comes back to you and it's garbage. I'll show illustrations of that. LaTeX is reliable. It ports from Unix to Windows to Linux to platform. It's from 1998 edition to 2004 edition. These upgrades don't affect it. Okay, built in by developers of it. It is stable. Usually it doesn't crash, at least not that much. It produces very nice output. It requires low machine memory. I'm talking about long documents. You can produce 700-page document on LaTeX easily as a single DVI output file. So low memory and speed requirements. Minuses. There is just too many people who you try to collaborate with who wouldn't use it. They don't use it. So it doesn't have a clueless user mode. You cannot put a person in LaTeX file and use it. You cannot give it to any secretary. Some of them are used to it, but most of them will look at it. Well, that looks like a computer program to me. All these backslashes and dollar signs. So it doesn't have an option for somebody to edit it, somebody who is not used to HTML programming at least. And it's somewhat cumbersome to maintain it. Multiple files. You have to remember which file was when. And you have to go through these compilation cycles. So the main thing about Word, it's widely used. Because it has the clueless user mode, it is there, it's available. It's what you see is what you get. It has all these nice enhanced features, which are partially implemented in most recent LaTeX passages, such as a spell check and track changes and multiple authors, manuscript writing system. A lot of neat stuff, But what is needed, this missing piece that LaTeX provides for automatic document generation, is most often missing in the way people use it. So minus is the figures are harder to position. That point is arguable. Some people would say in LaTeX figures travel to another page and you have to chase it. That's hard too. That depends how hardcore you are. If you can program LaTeX well, if you know every little command, you can typically grab that figure and hold it. But it requires a lot of knowledge. It's harder to program for automatic switching of text. For example, I have a thesis that has special edition. It has epigraphs for each chapter. And one command, and I remove all those epigraphs. You can do it with Visual Basic and Word, but it's not as obvious how to do it. It's perceived, at least perceived, as less reliable and less stable. In recent years, that improved a lot. 5 years ago, that would not be even questioned. The stability of Word documents versus LaTeX would be much lower. So that improved. It's easier to mess up. I'm talking about the inexperienced students. The way they do things with it are so much easier to mess up. Why does it happen that it's easier to mess up? So there are how people learn LaTeX. You ask them, how did you learn LaTeX? Oh, I have a book, it's about this big, and I went to a seminar. When universities teach LaTeX seminars, it's understood well. It's complicated, it's not embarrassing to go to such a seminar. And there are local wizards. At MIT, for example, there is this Athena computer system, and there are people who are almost around the clock dedicated to answering LaTeX questions over the net. And they are good. We were concocting, I hope those guys don't hear me now. We were concocting some very demanding requirements for our documents just to stop them. Okay, they were able to resolve that. There's a whole culture of these programmers doing it. So there are wizards who can help compiling it. You couldn't send a person to Microsoft, a graduate student in engineering who passed a lot of exams. I'm going to go to a lecture how to use Microsoft Word. Excuse me, this is ridiculous. You press a little blue button and it opens up. That's it. You're done. But what happens is they're not forced to learn the language of science when they do it. And that leads to certain results. So here's my illustration. Of course, I have many, but I left one for this presentation. One, they are unable to develop complex documents. If you want table of contents in LaTeX, it would be hard to avoid knowing how to do it, because in the learning, they would tell you / table of contents here, and you would know this command. In Word, it's not obvious. There is an insert table of contents, but if you don't know what to look for, you don't know about it. Moreover, it's the process of writing. When you develop a document, your half-developed table of contents is your guiding line. You know where you are, which chapters are missing. Then you start moving them around to develop your long document. Students who only previously in their life submitted memos and short homeworks, they don't even think about it in these terms. Okay, so they don't use it. So another example is rigor in equations. So I want to have x squared. Okay, in LaTeX, you put $sign to make it math mode. You put x. You need to do superscript. You'll learn that it's a caret. There's no other way. It has to be this little caret. 2 and $, and it will come out x squared. And every font will be correct because it's in the style file. You get it from an experienced user. You can get any of this stuff back. You can have X Arial and 2 Arial, X Arial bold and 2 Arial bold. And if you question it, the first response, most frequent response is anger. Stop bugging me with this. This means nothing. What's a big deal if it is bold or not bold? Well, in complex engineering documents, you need bold for matrix, and you need non-bold for just a variable. And you can have 7 or 8 different variations of the same letter in the same document, and they're all different. They all mean something. And it's very inappropriate to make a regular variable look like a matrix, even though if there are no other ones. They don't know that. So, whereas LaTeX would force most of this, a Word allows you to do anything you want. And then in that 1,000 pages that comes my way from the lab, I have to, it's a lot of markup. I wish I didn't have to do that. So, of course, I start teaching lectures. And in these lectures, each quarter, to my students in these lectures, I find these most frequent mistakes they make, and they build them in. Remind them that it matters which font you use for what you're typesetting. Trying to save my time. So in these lectures have been developing, and a couple of years ago, I found myself repeating them nearly monthly, maybe bi-monthly, because there is always somebody, a new collaborator or a new flock of students coming in, and again they're clueless, and I need to tell them how to effectively write, how effectively to do group writing. So I've been teaching these lectures. Then students started graduating, then they start getting emails. I came to this new lab, these guys are clueless, they're using ineffective methods. Do you mind if we teach this method? And I said, oh, no, sure, I don't mind. And this request started being more frequent. It became so frequent, we developed a video series. Okay? And now I get requests, do you mind if I force my lab director to watch your video series? Because he's a great guy, but we lose a lot of time on being inefficient. So this is coming to me. And it's not my intent here to teach this system. It's not, the system itself is not a big deal, but I wouldn't be able to do it in 1 hour. Okay, my purpose here is to talk about the problem that exists. So the general approach that's typically I have to tell to somebody who has resistance, another professor. Okay, because undergrad usually we just kind of do it my way. I'm professor, I know what I'm doing, and they will do it. Okay, but somebody older, they would say, oh, why do I need to do this? So you have to convince them. It's nice to have automated numbering of everything, automated referencing, automated cross-referencing of literature. It's nice to have automated positioning of figures. It will help us. Okay. We need to be compatible. We have to be able to copy, paste, email, reuse, work internally. I discussed it enough, but I spent 20 minutes with each new collaborator. I have to spend time, convince them that it's a good thing. Usually, well, so far, everybody who tried it eventually said, oh yeah, that makes sense, let's do it your way, fine, take the lead. So things have to be failure-proof. You have to upgrade the versions, embed the fonts. These are many little bit more advanced tricks that you cannot do in a short lecture, but it has to be part of the bigger system. When you write it, you need multiple software packages to work together. People often challenge, you cannot do equations in equation editor. That's true, you cannot do equations in equation editor. There's a well-known solution. You can take mass type, which is upgrade from equation editor, and then you can do most everything. And it even exports in LaTeX if you want it later. The solution exists. The problem is that if you do a poll of how many people know that this is the answer, it would be much less than half. Professors who write equations every day. Never heard of it. And even they have heard of it, it still doesn't help them because, okay, you can do equations, but you have to use the mouse every time, and the numbering is incorrect. Oh, just forget it, okay? So you have to present, system presents this whole system of packages. You have need to Word. The CorelDRAW is a good package for figures. MassType is good for equations. Reference manager for references. Anybody who uses LaTeX knows there is BibTeX because it's hard to walk around it. There is BibTeX. It's a good tool. With Word, you see so much manual stuff, whereas there is EndNote and Reference Manager that does the same in some aspects better. And then there are not so much tricks, but proper rules of using Excel. The most frequent mistake inexperienced students make, they make Excel chart of something. They're one of their first Excel charts. By default, all the fonts are font 10. You know, it's a chart with little fonts. Then they shrink it and put it in PowerPoint, and they present it, and you cannot see anything. Everything is too small. Trivial, but I have to teach it so often. Okay, so I'm sort of going through examples, part of the system. The headings need to be automated, equations need to be automated, figures, tables, references has to be automated, and there is a lot of oddball issues that falls into miscellaneous and another tail end. So it's what I have is the 6 videos in series. And the first one is missing. First one is an introduction, and then all this stuff, so that I don't have to repeat this every time. And example how it works is here you can see the slide. The people who, since I don't want to repeat it, they usually bring up this video
equations
and they listen to me.
This subject is a little bit more advanced than headings. There are 2 methods of making equations. Create a whole new template or to copy the existing template. This video describes only the second method. It is sufficient for most users. Once you copied the template of the object and created a new equation, you press Ctrl A, select all, and F9 for a global update. And then you'll have an equation. Let's do that. We have a generic report open with an equation here, and we want to create a second equation. In order to do that, we copy the entire Ctrl C, we copy the entire line that contains the equation.
Okay, so that goes on. But it made my life easier when I developed this. These are videos, certainly not commercial grade. I just made them for my students. And they all have to watch it. And then it makes our life easier. Okay, so you can recognize these slides, all right, and I could deliver it in each lecture. Why use template, how to use templates. That's the piece that I was showing. And then equations have to be numbered. There is a feature in Microsoft Word. You can insert figure, insert table, insert equation. It remains a mystery to me what is this insert, why insert equation function was developed. I haven't met a person, maybe there is one in this room, who used that function for automatic numbering of equations. For figures and tables, yes. But I so far haven't met a person who would use automatic equation numbering the way it logically falls out of Word. I don't know what that feature is for. So I had to recreate another method, another feature, which is convenient, reasonably convenient, that kind of emulates LaTeX, but is done in Word when you create a bookmark, not an automatic equation numbering, and you give it a nice name, and you later cross-reference to this name. Those of who know LaTeX, you know you have little name after each equation. Given this as a specific problem, most anyone would figure out how to do it. Okay, but as a small part of, in the absence of entire system, people just don't get to this point. Okay, so I'm not presenting you as a, oh, I made a big discovery in Word, let me tell you about it. No, it's not a big discovery. It's just convenient way of doing it, which very few people do. And so if after the lecture, maybe if somebody knows, can tell me, I'd be curious how to use this automatic equation number in the way Word suggested. I haven't met such a person. So how long does it take to learn the system? And experienced people, maybe 10 hours plus iterations. Why? Because they don't just need to learn typesetting. It's not obvious to them that the fonts and the figure have to be visible. So they shrink Excel into double column format and it becomes invisible. It's not obvious to them, or something more of a style. If you have an illustration, in a few words, that explanation words, they should be sans serif, Arial, rather than serif, such as Times New Roman, for style. Like this is sans serif. Sans serif is believed better for PowerPoint. All these things, hundreds of things that students, they don't know. So when they learn typesetting, they learn it all together with general style, how to write technical documents. Then experienced writer, to get the full system in their head, how to do everything effectively, about 3 hours. That's a person who doesn't need to know the style. They know how it should look at the end. They just don't know how to make it look like that. That's about 3 hours to learn that. And minimum knowledge for compatibility in about 1 hour. That's what I do with the professors who they don't have patience for anymore. I can hold their attention for about 1 hour. We go through this, and then we write our documents, proposals, reports together, and it goes smoothly. And their students interact with my students, and all comes out in nice output. So, conclusions of my presentation. I hope I conveyed that effective typesetting is important for overall efficiency of scientific activities, for collaboration between multiple people, for rigor of writing, so that you don't sacrifice your rigor to the reasons of typesetting. One of my conclusions, the fact is that current practices of using Word are inefficient. There are definitely pockets of people who are very good with typesetting, very effective, but they are rare. And one conclusion, it is possible to teach people to achieve functionality of other packages, of some LaTeX packages in Word, or in general. It's possible to teach them to be effective with typesetting, and Word can be a useful tool. I finished as I promised. I didn't plan to make it long. So at least 4 types of questions I can anticipate. You can challenge me. You disagree with something that I said. I welcome those questions, just random questions that I cannot predict. And then more discussion, what can be done about this situation that exists, or should something be done about it? And if yes, then how can this be done? Yeah, thank you.
Speaker.
Yeah. Any questions?
So when you have people who are experienced using LaTeX to write questions, that takes a lot of time to learn to begin with. How can you convince them to give up those and then get to use?
Yeah, usually, yeah, I tend to deploy my students onto these tasks rather than do it myself. Usually there are specific challenge questions that come in. And they say, what did I, something from last week. I had this discussion at Intel. Let me bring up Word. Somebody said, in LaTeX, I can easily do this. If something 0, something, and x, and something else. This equation looks like this. And they vehemently say, I bet you anything you want, you cannot do it in equation editor. And that's how it comes in. And true, yeah, probably you cannot do it in equation editor. I don't know. Maybe Oh, if some of you think you can, I don't know. We tried. We couldn't do it.
You can even do it with the word equation.
But I could come up with more complicated example also, if that, because you're challenging that. Yes, you can do it, and you're sort of on my side in that sense. So. Okay, so mass type is more advanced than editor, and I just have to show them, and I forget where it is. Somewhere here, there is this thing, and then somewhere here is this array, and then you can start filling it in. I'm like, oh, okay. But, and then there is a challenge. It's too complete. I don't understand this. But they say, it's easier in LaTeX because you can just write it out as a line. Okay, I would say that's harder because you have to always count these 7 parentheses on the right, 7 parentheses on the left. With big equations, I think it is harder. So even when I use LaTeX, I would tend to produce. The LaTeX output from mass type. So I would take copy, and if you want it in LaTeX, suppose this is a middle of LaTeX document, right? Oh, no, that's not what I wanted, I'm sorry. There is this export feature. Preferences, translators. So I will translate it into let's say, LaTeX 209, what I typically use because I'm not in math department. So if I copy this, if I later have a collaborator who uses LaTeX and they insist on it, well, I can produce this output. Okay, and what you see here is, well, this garbage is so that you can put it back in mass type if you ever want to, and you can see the % sign, so it's comment, right? I'm talking to those who know LaTeX. And here you can recognize begin array and all of that and the whole thing. I don't know, some people think it's easier for them to do this by hand. I don't think so.
Questions here, what happens if your collaborator edits LaTeX without comments?
Well, it should be, yeah, so the question is...
The rest of the text, not with the equation.
Right, if your collaborator comes in and edits this. Well, first of all, if we are working in Word, we both agreed to work in Word, the collaborator wouldn't have an opportunity to do this. They would just work with equations in equation editor or mass type. If the system is so bimodal that there are people who are taking this, converting it to LaTeX, then later forget about this and start editing this, I guess more power to them. Yeah, they would discover later than you if you take this and copy back. You understand what this does, right? This becomes very specific, how you want to organize, how complex is your set of relationships. So if I copy this stuff back to mass type, okay, nothing existed, right? And I do Control V, it creates it, recreates it again. Yeah, if people start breaking both of those, that would be hard. Someone jokingly, into a similar question, suggested, well, if you are really hardcore, you also learn this language. Yeah, it's a joke. I didn't mean it seriously. Yes.
Problem. Did you ever have the one you enumerated in your horror stories? Namely, you have some report prepared in Word, and then you want to extract article for some magazine for it, and magazine accepts only LaTeX input.
Okay, did we have this problem that the question is, what about the horror story? You work in Word, but magazines require only LaTeX. I didn't have it. In engineering, it doesn't happen. There are a few, especially mathematics-oriented magazines, where they indeed only accept LaTeX. And I guess there are a few people for whom emphasis on LaTeX is so strong, so big, they should stick with it. I think there is a subset of people, it's another subset of people for whom doing everything as Word doesn't fit. I think still a large majority of people, they would have sometimes this need to go to LaTeX, but so many other advantages would be given to them by Word. So if they were still basing on Word and sometimes taking extensions of LaTeX, then they should, I forgot software name, it starts with K, Ktalk or something like that. There is software that produces pre-LaTeX output and equations you create a math type and you export them, so it becomes a relatively painless process. Also, it would be only short documents that require it. Usually, you may have a journal that insists on it. Well, I guess that's not true. There are publishers that require books in LaTeX. Yeah, it becomes a judgment call. I think it's rare in most fields, but there are fields that do that. Okay, yes?
It seems like that there's a couple of different threads here. I mean, one of them is this problem of, you know, I use this system and my collaborators want to use that system and how am I going to go back for it? But another one seems to be that a lot of people simply don't know or don't follow certain invariants or certain good practices. And
especially in Word, right?
All right, let's say that it's more common in Word than in LaTeX, for whatever reason, they do follow them, or it makes it whatever.
For the reason that LaTeX requires you to, it's built in such with that importance.
So I could imagine then the question is, okay, so let's say that's the statement of the facts, and then the question is what to do about it. Okay. Now I can imagine, well, you could force your students or have education courses to force people to learn about certain concepts and to be sympathetic, and that's a fine route, but maybe doesn't scale. You could perhaps change the tools so that they address this problem in some way. Or perhaps we could somehow distribute into, you know, template files. Like if I go to a conference, I usually download some template file, and if the template file somehow subtly taught these best practices, maybe that would take over. Now, I'm thinking that the template thing is those things go from sort of easier to harder. That is, the easier things to do are what you're describing with these courses, but they don't scale. The hardest thing would be to change the word, but and that would scale, so it's hard but doesn't scale. And maybe distributing in various conferences some good examples is something that would scale better than your courses, but isn't as hard. I don't know.
That's a very wonderful collection of comments, and I also see this this way, that what can be done can be approached from very different angles. Indeed, you can. The education courses, they probably scale somewhat if you produce short enough books so people have, you know, patience for it, and it's available to those who want to do it. That's one thing to do. With templates, also a very interesting comment. This is, by the way, my template. You may have seen. I'm abusing it now, but in its pristine form, it's a generic report, right? Template available to my students, and you copy paste these templates and practices, but built into the text are little comments, maybe a little hard to see, but it tells people this is table of contents, and it can be self-generated as you write a report. Do not forget to keep capitalization. So this is a little 4-page document where the contents, I'm sorry, I'll put it here. It says here, 4 levels of headings are provided above, and so on. It actually goes through these things. So it's an example of template. I haven't used it at conferences. Where I use, although I organized some, I don't know, it's hard for me to say, because conferences, people like to be independent. You usually give them how it has to look, and they all go and suffer and do it their way, and you get something close. Yeah, I guess templates could be somewhat improved. One place where I used it is with undergrads. I have a team. There's 26 students on the team. At the end, they have to produce a report that is 150 pages. And they get a template like this, several pages, which tells them minimum things to do, and they all submit a 5-page report. And one student, president of the team, pulls it all together and pastes it together, and the result of a class, after just 1 hour of pasting it together, is a properly formatted, fully numbered, comprehensive report of the complex project management exercise that these students went through that is used by classes next year. So by providing this template, I enabled creation of this long 150-page report from a group of 26 inexperienced, relatively inexperienced with typesetting people. Yeah. Other things, yeah, could be done. It's the kind of whole of my main purpose here is to find people who want to do something about it. Yes?
Do you think that your approach scales up to really mathematical texts, not only engineering text with an equation or two here and there, but really mathematical texts with a lot of math in line? Because in my experience, in my other life, I'm a professor of math. And many times students have come up having to write a thesis or a report, but I don't want to learn LaTeX.
Yeah.
And since this stuff can be understood religiously, I don't want to impose anything on them. I advise them to use LaTeX, but I encourage them to go ahead. And not one single case has anyone come through and completed the stuff in Word. They would typically show up in 2 weeks looking pale and suffering from lack of sleep. What did you say about LaTeX?
I'm very familiar with this.
Do you think that it would go through for mathematical texts, for real mathematical texts too?
Let me make this question a little bit easier for myself, and then I will address the full question. So, if you ask me this question, but without the real mathematical text, the stories of students not wanting to use LaTeX, trying to do it in Word, and then eventually switching to write the thesis, they are also very, very common in engineering, extremely common. They first don't want to switch it for that horror story that I said. They already produced a whole bunch of output in Word, and they don't want to do it. But, so they try. They try, and it's hard. I haven't had failures after people learn the system that I'm talking about in engineering. And some of our stuff is, okay, it's not hardcore math, but it's signal processing with a lot of inline and complex equations. I think it is possible to push it if it's done properly. And the key there is, I think it's a trivial key. It's a knowledge of one of these system elements that I said, organization of document, but when specifically when you come to inline math, it's in the shortcuts. It's this beauty of not having to do it with the mouse and going back and forth is, in LaTeX you just keep your hands on keyboard and you go $sign and \epsilon $, and you do this. This can be done in Word. So if you put together the shortcuts, the keyboard shortcuts, and all this numbering, okay, then I think it can be done. Because now let me imagine you challenge me back, but students were unable to do it. Would you tell me they were unable to do it because of inline math? I don't think so, because this is just a matter of patience, copy and paste all that inline math. I think they would be unable to do it because the organization of a complex document is killing them. Okay, so that tells me that most likely even hard math documents would be able to set this way.
Unless they exceed 400 equations per file.
No, okay, I discussed it with Alex.
Saving it, takes 5 minutes. Yes. 10 seconds. Or crashes. Yes.
This is in the, okay, now, when you want to push it farther and farther, yeah, there becomes this challenges of very long documents. What if you have 400 figures and 100 of them are bitmaps, and then there is more than 400 equations, and it's just the nature of the one document. It's too big. Then there is a way to convert to master document and subdocuments.
This is per 40-page document. But if you have inline equations, you can get 400.
Yeah. Still, you started asking this question. I think we didn't address it, and it's very interesting to know what is the major limitation. Is it inline math? Is it automation of the document? Is it just particular formula they cannot type in because...
Well, I actually don't know. I haven't tried to teach anyone how to use Word to write mathematics because I don't know how to do it myself.
It's a very common answer, and in math it's comfortable to stay on LaTeX. Some people they just should probably stay with it. It's comfortable. The system has advantages. Once you have so many industrial collaborators, it's hard to go around the need to have it in Word too.
Yeah, I have both experiences.
Right. Yeah.
I'm interested in the video material that you pulled together in your template here, and I wonder, if each organization or research group, is it typical that they would each concoct something like this that's specific to their needs, or if Microsoft were to try to provide content like this, would it be so generic that it wouldn't be useful for specific needs?
Okay, so I guess the question is this system, is this series of videos very narrow, addresses narrow audience, or is it generic? I think if I say engineering, any kind of engineering, it applies. Okay. You start venturing into business, it becomes less important. You start venturing into the really dense math, okay? Also maybe less, but entire engineering, I would say.
Is it available?
Yeah.
Is it available? I tried to look up on your page and didn't see anything.
Well, we have it hidden internally. I can give you the link. Yes, it's not that it is secret. We just didn't put it on the front page. We have a whole internal web page, our internal things. Not only these videos, but the rules of the lab and who is responsible for cleaning the fridge and all kinds of stuff. Right? we don't open all of that to the world. But part of the things why I'm doing this presentation, it would be nice to make it available to the world, but better. It's currently with my accent. It's currently unrefined. It's without a thought for these broader issues and without breaking it. Now, it addresses specifically a typical graduate student. That's what it is. But it needs to be broken. Something just for typical professor, something for typical undergrad, for typical corporate person. There are, so it would take anywhere between 1 hour and 15 hours, and it has to be the scalable, you pick what you need to learn. Okay? And then I think it would address pretty broad audience. You know, you're talking hundreds of universities, thousands of departments. Yeah.
I saw that you gave up one of the pros of using Word, the speller. And I wasn't expecting that because also you have spellers available for later. You can use for a lot of languages there are spellers. But my question is related to that is, what are the things that you would like to see in the speller from Word that will improve the quality of the work scientifically?
Okay, so there are two questions. First, was more of a comment than a question that I emphasize spelling in Word, but there is spelling available for LaTeX documents. If you were listening to my words also, as I was doing, I said that's a small thing and spelling is sort of available for LaTeX. I personally think it's implemented in a less effective way in particular packages, but it's a small thing. Now, what would they like to see different in Word speller? Well, it's outside of this lecture, but in general, the biggest is, it's a known problem. It would require some sort of artificial intelligence. Alex actually knows exactly how it's called. It's the words that principle and principle, okay? The words that they are both correct, they both exist, but they mean different things. Sometimes contextually, some not too complicated artificial intelligence tools might suggest that probably you don't want to say. If it's a scientific principle, most likely it's not the principal that's director of school principal. It's probably principal. I get this misspelling from my students for some reason, roughly once a month. Yeah.
That's the kind of feature that we are working on to add to spelling. That's what we're calling context spelling. And
right, contextual
statistical information that fits that are not only help with errors, but it helps with errors in context.
Even better if it could write the whole paper for me, just pressing the button, I would buy that software too, but I think that's a little farther in the future. Okay, so any last minute question? Yeah.
So you mentioned that LaTeX looks much better than equation editor.
No, not the equation. Equations look about the same. What looks better typically is the entire document, the control of orphans. You know, orphans on one line goes there. The spacing. It usually.
Word has orphan control.
Word, yeah, it's the facts of life. If I have in my template, I have this figure and this caption. In Word, it exists separately. So if I start moving it, first the caption would go on another line, then the figure. I can enforce it. Orphan control from here and keep caption with the figure. I can enforce it.
Okay.
But most people don't. Fact of life, most people would never think about it. So you get orphans all the time. In LaTeX, it just wouldn't happen. It forces you to put it together in that environment, begin figure, end figure. Your caption is inside. It's not going anywhere. Yes?
Suppose you decide after writing a paper that you want to change your variable alpha sub 2 into beta sub 2 throughout the paper. How do you do that?
I don't have a good answer for that. If you have a text and you do global replace, you change the variable. Yeah, I think at this point I don't have a good answer for that. I
Go back to LaTeX.
You can do it in LaTeX.
Yeah, that would be, to do things like that, Word 2006 should do that. This should be type of a comment given to developers. This is the missing, I think, I am answering it on the fly. Maybe there is a way to do it. But let's say it's a missing capability. Then this is type of question. Yes, it's truly missing capability, but next version of Word should address that. Should be doable.
What else should be maybe a Word 2010 could understand a piece of inline LaTeX.
Well, there are already. No, that's done. It looks a little ugly, but you can. There is a stack to Word routines, and you go that and take some inline LaTeX and converts it into Word, puts Greek characters in. That exists. It's just not perfect, but it exists. It's a typical senior course project in Germany and Spain. For some reason, they like doing that. These translators between them.
What else would you like to see in Word 2006?
So what else would I like to see in Word 2006? I think the ability to handle big documents somehow. To make it so that the figures exist in outside files. Okay, it's kind of done, but after a lot of effort, it's not done right. In my opinion, as far as I know.
what
LaTeX it does not require much memory because you can have just links to figures, and figures live separately. Okay, and in Word, you can kind of do that, but it doesn't work very well. I would have to get on a computer to show how.
Memory limitations in real life.
Yes. Yeah.
You do.
Yes. That's very serious.
Memory is getting cheap these days.
I'm
talking about a 1,000-page document 5 years ago. So.
Yeah.
Maybe now it's better.
It's only a couple of years ago that it became possible for my students to do 200-page thesis in Word. It's done. But still, you press a button and you wait until it will save it, even though all you change is one word. And it goes save it. 17 seconds for it can be long. Yeah. There are tricks and you
want to print it, you go for coffee outside of the building.
Yeah.
I have one very different question. How attached are you to the fonts you are using? To the typeset? To the fonts?
To the fonts?
Yeah.
Yeah, I pretty much stick to Times New Roman and Arial and all other fonts for me, practically non-existent. There are people who make greeting cards, and I am not.
If
For me, all this stuff is useless.
Microsoft would like to encourage you to use some new typefaces in the future, how responsive you will be?
Off the cuff, I don't see. I don't see. I would have to be convinced with some strong reasons. Yeah.
So your system, your presentation, does it include any tips on how to use the equation editor or math type, or it just says here you have to use equation editor and that's it?
It just gives a link to mass type booklet. Yeah, I did not do that. All of them. There is. So the question is, do I teach people to use mass type? This is a bigger issue. This is how you need 17 or 20 hours to become really good at it, because I don't remember where that slide is. Let's see, slide 15. Because honestly, you need to actually learn all of this. To learn mass type well, you need a couple of hours with a tutorial on mass type. To learn Corel Draw well, there is a tutorial, and it's 3 hours, and then you practice, and it's another 3-4 hours, and only then you draw pretty well. To learn Reference Manager, it's a little bit, it remains a system with many little bugs, so that's several hours too. Yeah, so I take it sort of outside. So I tell my students, go learn this, go learn this. That takes, yeah.
This one has similar functionality as Big Tab?
Yeah, you want to see?
Is it Unicode based?
So I cannot answer that question. I don't know if it's Unicode based. I have no idea. I'm a user. So.
Use English words.
Okay, so we have this reference manager, and it has every paper that was ever used by our students. It's a database of our lab, because if my doctoral student developed a set of references and my next doctoral student needs to reinsert them, I'm wasting my time, and it's in hundreds. So there is probably 2,000 or 3,000 references here. On this computer, it's not easy. My home computer would show it differently. But anyway, you can do it by author, okay? And right now, it's alphabetical by author. You can organize it by title. You can organize it, actually, by many other ways, which I won't spend time on it now, but you could trust me. There are many other features you could alphabetize it on. For example, we have a column, I don't have it here, but topics. If you want everything on robotics, we have a separate robotic subfield. So if I want this paper by Lazzarini, I just randomly picked it. All I have to do is I insert it here. Oh, this, okay, just a second. I'm using my presentation computer where I never work on this computer. But, okay, you pick a journal for each reference has to look differently for each journal, so you pick a journal here. So clinical gastroenterology, whatever. Okay. Actually, in medical fields, it's very, very common. You are seeing some intermediate windows that you wouldn't see in a real used system. And at the end here, there is now a little bibliography, and you see I just added that paper by Lazzarini, and it's and they want Lazzarini R rather than Al Lazzarini, that particular journal, and it's done. You want to do for another journal, you just switch there, and it will switch everything.
It's a reference manager who knows style of.
Yeah.
That's better than
I should say the styles for engineering are poorly developed, so for electrical engineering, we just redeveloped our own. Now it's part of our knowledge. We use IEEE version 11 developed in our lab, and it makes it beautiful.
If you are working on book, if you are working on book, how would you define your style? How will you designate your
Well, the style in the books are usually required. There is something required by the publisher. I happen to work in electrical engineering, and Wiley, I have some book articles in Wiley. They were happy to accept the electrical IEEE style.
So this reference manager provides enough styles.
It provides, but if it doesn't, in 1 hour you can learn, in 2 hours you can learn how to create your own style. Because there is a tool that tells you, put every title in italics, right? So there is a tool that allows you to do that. So you can create your own style, specific style for Microsoft Research Lab number 17, and it will be your style. Yeah. But that's another couple of hours of learning.
And can you merge few databases of references?
Oh yeah, we do it all the time.
You can.
But it's very advanced question in some sense. What we do, each member of our lab has their numbers. For example, I own numbers from 4,000 to 5,000.
Yeah.
And my numbers are there. And my students, let's say, they own numbers from 2,000 to 2,500. So when we merge the databases, numbers do not overlap. And then it works. So that's
it. So this member has this reference, other member has the same reference. What's going to happen?
Yeah, the database gets a little longer.
Not a problem in BibTeX, right?
You have duplicate entries, but it works the same.
Oh, no, okay.
You may have a few duplicates. Yeah, it's actually very common, but this is the case when memory is cheap. Okay, you have to remember another duplicate. That's okay. From time to time, you go clean and eliminate them. Then they show up again. Yeah.
So you mentioned the feature that certain equation of the number that work.
To my knowledge.
Can you?
I'm pretty sure there's no professor in my department. What I don't understand what this feature does. It may mean something, but it's just none of my students know what it's for, and I'm just sharing it with you. The fact that answer may exist doesn't change the fact. The fact that answer may exist doesn't change the fact that none of us know what it's for. So insert. Let me think. Where is?
Reference.
Yeah. Thank you. Insert cross-reference. I know what's number item for. I know heading, bookmark, footnote, equation. This feature, I don't know what it's for, because it doesn't allow me, to my knowledge, to put a number on the right in parentheses, like all equations typically are. It starts doing this. Okay, I don't have an equation created yet, so I would have to create it first. Well, I don't know what to do because I don't know how to use it. I think I answered the equation to the extent. Which feature I'm referring to? This feature.
But must type has this.
Yeah, must type helps number in equation. That's not the one I use because I don't see how to cross-reference LaTeX style in mass type. Maybe there is a way, I'm not aware of it. So I use bookmark for it. Yes.
For typing equation, there is one big problem because in equation editor or even math type, if you want to get space, you have to keep typing the space option there.
No, this is strictly knowledge. There is vertical alignment, and there is spaces. All these features are there.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. I may not produce it in 5 seconds,
I see.
but in a couple of minutes we can take it offline and we'll find this feature. I guarantee there is a feature for it, for vertical alignment. Like I want to have, was there something? You want something like A and then equal sign and then equal sign and equal sign and nothing here, right? Right. There is a way to do it. It's convenient.
Alt space.
Yeah.
Does your practice have any limitations or dependencies on versions of Word?
On versions of Word?
Do you enforce a particular, everybody needs to use this version or higher? Or any platform issues? I know, for example, like Microsoft Word works on the Macintosh, however, equation editor is not as well supported, and probably the software you use to include references probably doesn't work.
It's a good question, and the answer is probably yes. There are probably portability limitations from PC to Mac. Since I force everyone to use Word in my lab, I also force everyone to use PC in my lab, just so that we are all compatible.
So you make that enforcement?
Within my lab, yeah, I people who are under me in my organization, I don't expect to deal with Mac incompatibility. I'll buy you a computer, I'll buy you a PC, use it. If you use Mac, it's fine, but as long as it's transparent to me. I work with people with Macs. We didn't come across problems, but I suspect they exist.
Yeah, do you actually make that enforcement in your practice? You use a PC, or it just so happens that no one ever came in with, I have Microsoft Word version 5, will this work?
Things happen like, with versions it happens. I think it's also part of the, I don't know, maybe, of the desire of companies to sell more software. Version 4 of MassType was upgraded to version 5. You need to buy it again because this Office for 2004, version 4 doesn't work. So it's good for MassType. They can sell more copies. That exists typically. There is a new version that takes care of compatibility. If you randomly go back and forth between various packages, Specifically on Reference Name Manager, though, I haven't seen that problem. I think with several versions of Word that we use, it always worked. Yeah.
Who manufactures Reference Manager?
You'd have to look up on Google, like MassType, it's Design Science who manufactures them. And it probably was a different company a few years ago. Names change. Reference Manager, okay, so fine. These names didn't change. I don't remember. Reference Manager and EndNote, I think now are manufactured by the same company, and it used to be probably different companies, and they do the same thing. I don't know why there is two EndNote and Reference Manager, because they look really much the same. Okay.
So I heard there were some WYSIWYG tools based on tech. Have you heard of those? Have you tried to use them?
I guess I'm just not an expert to judge. I tried it, and it was very slow. But it was like 2 or 3 years ago. It is possible to do what you see is what you get on LaTeX.
There are a couple of development tools. More or less, none of them is perfect.
Yeah, I found them insufficient. There was always something like there is this desire to do it, but it looks raw and it's not quite there. Maybe by now that I practically don't deal with LaTeX, I don't know the most recent last month's update. Maybe there's some.
So your 700-page thesis was actually done in Word?
No, it was done on LaTeX. It was only after I graduated, became a professor, worked for a couple of years, and if you go on my webpage, you would see how many industries are companies are my sponsors, and I had to send the reports to every industrial sponsor. It's only then that I made the switch. Actually, the first year or two, my lab operated under LaTeX, and they resisted, and I switched them into LaTeX. And 2 years later, I switched them all into Word. It was a riot, but eventually, it's Word.
What's the biggest document that you've produced with this system?
500 pages. Yeah.
All in one file or in several files?
It happens to be one file. Somehow it still survives. I know how to break it into pieces. Yeah, I'm writing a book and there's lots of stuff. And it's currently 500 pages. It came to the limit, and then I upgraded my computer, and it's still alive. So it's basically in the computers. I just need a couple of 100 pages, and I think I'll survive.
So I suppose if you need, to avoid retyping a whole bunch of equations, suppose maybe a quote of equation are coming from the old book.
Yeah.
You want to import that to the Word.
Yeah.
Then you use this software to convert from LaTeX equation to Microsoft Word. Does it do the other way around, or only?
No, there are packages that try to do that, but it's quite inefficient. Only very simple stuff. Single Greek character they will do, but advanced equation, not very.
Did you physically retyping a whole bunch of other things, or if they do share some of the things?
I'm not that old. I don't have a book that I wrote 20 years ago, so I physically didn't have to deal with it. Typically, what is done, Wiley, for example, the publisher, right? They would tell a professor, we'll pay for an undergrad to do this typesetting for you. And professor announces in class, oh, we are retyping this book, and we need an undergrad to typeset in LaTeX. And there's usually excited, yes, me. And yes, $10 an hour. Okay, thank you. Wow, you really took the whole hour and a half. Yeah.
question how to do the alignment? Yeah, I don't know how to do alignment.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
So we would like, they are in Europe.